What is up, Facebook and YouTube and anywhere else that I put this? So, I've been talking about giving you guys my story for a while. Most of you guys that know me already know the vast majority of my story. But I figured I'd make another video because I said I would, and basically just break it all down for you again and add in where I'm at today. For those of you that know, my clean date is October 17th, 2017, and today's date is the 29th. So it has been 10, 11, 12. It has been a year and 12 days since I have done any drugs, which for me is huge. That is probably, not even probably, that is the hardest thing I have ever had to do. There's been harder things that I've dealt with. There's definitely been a lot of things that have been harder to deal with, but as far as things that I've actually done, this is definitely the hardest. I want to make sure my camera was recording. Hopefully you can even see me. I don't even know if this is pointing at me right now. I got this light shining in my face. So, where to begin? Well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell the story from the perspective of if you did not know me at all. So, my name is Joshua Stagnito. I was a heroin addict / cocaine addict. And it's actually kind of weird. I don't really know what to say what I was addicted to. I was physically addicted to heroin, to opiates. Towards the end, it wasn't even heroin. It was fentanyl. 100% raw, pure heroin, intravenous, in my jugular, going straight to my brain, was not strong enough. I had to do fentanyl. I had to do pure fentanyl just to get off dope sick. And the amount of drugs that it took for me to actually get high, it would probably kill a good handful of people doing the same dose. So I was addicted to opiates physically, but mentally what I always craved was the coke. Which was weird. But every time I've ever relapsed was because I craved coke. I don't really ever crave heroin. I don't think besides when I was dope sick, obviously, I don't think I ever really craved heroin. I always craved the coke. But starting from the beginning. How far back do I go? Well, I'll start at the very beginning. Sometime in the 80s, early 80s, my grandfather allegedly was being tailgated, as I've heard the story. He was being tailgated. He got all pissed off. My grandpa's a hothead. He got out of the car. The other dude got out of the car too, as well. And they ended up getting into a fight. My grandpa ended up beating him up pretty bad. My grandpa gets in the car, he leaves, drives away. The next day, one of his buddies calls him up, who was a cop, and he told him, like, "Hey, did you get into a fight yesterday?" And he was like, "Yeah, why?" He was like, "Well, that guy you beat up was a cop, so you need to come turn yourself in." So my grandpa said, basically, fuck that. He packed up his family and moved to Montana to go on the run. That's the story I heard. If that's true or not, I have no idea. That's just what I heard. So in Montana, my dad was 19 years old. He met my mother. They were working at a Pizza Hut in Montana. Obviously, they got together. 9 months later, I was born when my father was 20 years old, and my mother was 19 years old. Obviously, I don't remember when I was a baby, but from what stories I've heard, there was a lot of drama back then, as far as like my mom leaving my dad, and then at one point she moved to California with me, and then my dad went and got me, and it's like a whole bunch of back and forth, a bunch of craziness. And then eventually they all ended up back in Rochester, New York, which is where my dad is from. My mom came with him, and my mom's actually been here ever since. She turned out to love New York, which is weird because I grew up in New York and I prefer Montana. Like whenever I'm in Montana, I miss it, and I want to come home back to Rochester. I miss the grittiness of it, but Montana is just, it's something else. Like if you've never been there, I can't even accurately describe it how it is. It's just serene. But that's besides the point. So 3 years later, 1989, my little brother Tony was born. I remember my dad asking me what I wanted to name him, and I was 3. So I said Big Bird. I really wanted to name Tony Big Bird, but they ended up naming him Anthony Rocco Stagnato, born on March 21st, 1989. So a couple years later, my brother Nick was born. A couple years later, my brother Joe was born. So ever since I was a little kid, I think 6 years old, it's always been me and my 3 little brothers. And we were always there for each other, more so as adults, but even as little kids, dealing with a lot of the stuff that we were dealing with an extremely mentally abusive stepdad. We were always there for each other. I ended up getting kicked out of my mom's house. She sent me to live with my dad because they couldn't handle it anymore. My stepdad took my mom, I think it was Valentine's Day, took her to some restaurant and hotel for as a Valentine's Day present, I guess, and left me and Nick home alone. Like we were old enough to be alone. It's not like we were babies or anything. I think I was 11, 12, something like that. So, 11, 12-year-old, you leave them home alone, what are they going to do? They're going to stay up all night watching TV. So that's exactly what I did. Real quick, pause. You guys are going to hear me turning my fans on my computer up quite a bit. So if you hear the background noise kicking on, that's what it is. I'll turn them down when my temperatures get low enough, and I turn them off when they're cool enough. But obviously, you turn your fans off on a computer, things start overheating, so that's why. But that's besides the point. So, Valentine's Day, I'm up all night watching TV. I was watching, we had basic cable in our apartment complex, and 41 used to be BET, and I was watching music videos, just and enjoying basically being home alone and getting to watch whatever I want and not having to fight for the TV with, 3 other little brothers. And there was an advertisement on TV for some number that you can call. It was basically a chat line. And so it was to talk about music and stuff like that. So I was curious to what people were talking about. I wanted to hear about the music. So I called the chat line. And never actually got through that one, but when I called that one, there was a recording in the beginning to call this other chat line. So I called the other chat line, and then I called that one. There was another advertisement to call this other one, so I stayed on that one for a little bit, and then I called this other one, and just went back and forth calling all these different chat lines, just because I was bored. Well, a couple months go by, and I'm playing Crash Bandicoot, I believe, on PlayStation 1. And I have headphones on, and I'm sitting in the living room playing this game, and my stepdad runs over to me, rips these things off my head, and basically just grabs me, manhandles me, and slams me down in the kitchen, and shows me a phone bill for, I think it was almost $500. I was a little kid, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. Like, they did say that there was some charge, but it was something small. It was like $1 a minute or something like that. Like, when you're a kid, you don't realize that there's, you know, fees and a bunch of other bullshit. So, you know, besides any of that, the phone bill ended up being like $500. So obviously they were a little upset about that, to say the least. So I got grounded for a year was my punishment for that. So now my life consists of going to school, coming home, and sitting in my room for a long time. It wasn't quite a year, but it was several months. And it was also around this time that my stepdad changed from the new boyfriend trying to impress the mother and trying to impress the kids by taking them camping all the time and doing this and doing that. And now he turned into who he is, who he really is, which is a manipulative, mean person, you know, and coming from the standpoint of a 11, 12-year-old, this is this guy you're looking up to. You know, your dad's not around. We did go to his house every other weekend, but, you know, more times than not, we would skip weekends, and it was just, I felt like there was no escape, you know, from dealing with bullshit. So, Mike started, that's his name is Mike, my stepdad. He started doing a lot of things, and, you know, granted, now I'm a 32-year-old man. I could look back on it and see that there was, you know, it's not like he was just picking on me for no reason. Like, I was doing a lot of bad shit. But me being a 32-year-old man now, I could look back on the stuff that happened, and now I can fully grasp just how fucked up the things were that were done to me and my brothers. Like, for instance, obviously a kid is always going to think his dad is, you know, his dad's boss, his dad is king. So we'd say something involving our dad, and of course, because, you know, my stepdad is trying to impress everybody and trying to show that he's in charge and not anybody else, and he's the one that needs to be worshipped and blah, blah, blah. At one point, I don't remember why or what the argument was or what was going on, but at one point he held me by my throat up against the wall while he was screaming in my face, "Your father doesn't love you. If your father loved you, he'd be here. He'd come pick you up, blah, blah, blah." So do that to a 12-year-old who's already going through a bunch of shit. And mind you, this is the very, very short version. Like, there's a lot of stuff in between that I'm not talking about. But things that a 12-year-old should not have to deal with. One memory that sticks out in my head was me being a 10, 11, 12-year-old kid laying in my bed, because that's all I did was lay in my bed. And I've always been religious, I've always been Christian, I've always believed in God. And, you know, call it 12. A 12-year-old kid laying in my bed praying to God that he would kill me. Like, I don't think I had the courage to do it myself, you know, kill myself, but I definitely prayed, and I prayed that God would take my life. I would pray that I would not wake up in the morning, and I'd keep waking up in the morning, and I would go to school, and I'd come back from school, and I would sit in my room, and I would sit in my bed. Now, mind you, when I was grounded, that didn't mean go play in your room all day. That meant you were allowed to sit on your bed, and that's it. So basically solitary confinement, other than I was allowed to come downstairs and eat dinner with the rest of the family. Sometimes. Most of the time, but there were a few occasions where I wasn't allowed. So now, since I'm not getting any, like, none whatsoever form of love, or I didn't feel like anybody cared about me at home, I needed to feel like people cared about me other places, which was school, which was the only other place that I had any type of socializing with anybody. So I would do, you know, stupid little things. Like, one point I took change out of this jar so I could buy pizza, because I think it was on like Fridays or something like that. They had pizza. They had the regular school lunch, or they had pizza, and you had to buy the pizza. It wasn't part of the free lunch. So I brought a bunch of quarters to school so I could buy pizza for, my little friends that I had at school. This was in middle school, by the way. And one of them, either Mike or my mom, found out that I stole change from him. And that was this huge ordeal. Actually, I think the change was before middle school. I think the change incident was when I was still in whatever's before middle school. Yeah, it was a several year long stretch that this all happened over. So it's kind of hard to narrow down exact times, but I just remember events. I remember how I felt about it. So now it was getting to the point where I couldn't just sit in my room and do nothing. Like, I'm a 12-year-old boy. Like, a 12-year-old's mind is supposed to be stimulated. He's supposed to be taught things, and that's when they learn important things about, like, socializing and growing up. And that's how what wires their brain to be how it's going to be. And during that crucial time in my brain's development, I was sitting in my bed staring at my ceiling, which, that in itself was pretty bad. But I'm also, keep in mind, I'm leaving out a bunch of stuff. So at one point, I was calling my dad collect whenever I went to school, because at this point, I forgot to bring this up, we're not allowed to talk to our father anymore. We weren't allowed to talk to him. We weren't allowed to see him, nothing. Over some bullshit. But so I'd call him collect from school, and his phone bill was getting up there, a couple $100. So he told me, you can't collect anymore. Like, try to call me from a counselor's office or something like that, but I don't have the money to keep paying, $300-400 a month on a phone bill. So I was back at home. We went grocery shopping. The whole family went grocery shopping, which was me and my brothers and my mom and my stepdad. So since I was grounded, I got to sit in the van while they went grocery shopping. And it's not like they went in for 5 minutes and they were back out. My mom's always been like this. When she goes grocery shopping, she goes from aisle to aisle to aisle to aisle to back to this aisle to back to over that aisle to back and forth, and it's a 2-3 hour long process sometimes. So I'm a 12-year-old kid sitting in this van, conversion van, just doing nothing, just sitting there. And so I'm bored. So I started rummaging around in the van to see what's in there, see what I could play with. And I find a Wegmans bag with a very old cell phone in it. So I'm playing with it. I turn it on. It has power. And so what do is I take the cell phone. I didn't steal it, I mean, I guess technically that is stealing, but the intention was never to, do anything bad or, anything like that. The intention was, I have the cell phone, now I can use it to call my dad. Maybe he can rescue me. I even tried running away one time, and I rode my bike from North Tri-LA all the way to Avery Street in the city. And it ended up being, when I got to my dad's house, he wasn't even there. I didn't know how to get a hold of anybody. I knew that I was screwed. I knew I couldn't go home. And my dad was actually at work that entire day. So I sat at my dad's girlfriend's house for the entire day with nobody there, and basically just watched TV all day until my dad's girlfriend got home. And she brought me to see my dad at the car shop he was working at with his buddy. And then they drove me back to my house. So I'm not going to get into every single happening, because that's not what the story is about, but I just wanted to give you an idea about my childhood. Was not fun. It was not happy. I had a very, very shitty childhood. Like, all I wanted was a family. Like the how you picture a family to be in your head is how any other person pictures it in their head. A normal, loving family where you feel cared about, you feel loved. And I did not feel that. I knew that I was just dead weight that nobody wanted around, and it was a pretty heartbreaking feeling to grow up feeling that in your heart that nobody cares about you and nobody loves you. And on top of that, if they had the option, they'd get rid of you if they could. And with that, they did get rid of me. Since I was always grounded, and well, not always grounded, it's one period of time that I was grounded for, but it covered such a long amount of time. I would be bored, and my stepdad found out about the cell phone. That was a huge fight. That was, him getting physical with me, like he's a tough guy, like, trying to intimidate a 12-year-old. And very, very often I'd be put into like such a rage that I would just freak out. But I knew that if I like did anything too bad, I would get my ass beat. So I would just punch my pillow, or I'd scream as loud as I could into my pillow, or punch my mattress. But one time I punched my floor, and I hear stomping coming up the stairs, and my stepdad gets in my face, shoves me up against the wall, and his face is that far from my face, and he's yelling at me like, "Oh, you're a tough guy, right? You're so fucking tough. Why don't you punch me in the face? If you're so tough, punch me in the face." "Yeah, you're not tough. You're not a tough guy." So, a lot of bullshit like that. So, I was always bored. I was always getting into shit to try to entertain myself, because I was literally going fucking crazy, sitting in my room doing literally nothing day in and day out, over and over and over and over again. So one of the times I was taking something apart. I can't even remember what it was. I was taking something apart. Actually, that's the reason now why I'm so good at tinkering with stuff and why I love building computers, is because I had that key development point in my life was spent taking things apart and putting them back together. So my brain got wired into being real good at taking things apart and putting them back together, or creating other things, or taking apart CD players and making remote control cars out of them, and stuff like that. But I needed a razor blade to cut something, to cut a wire or something like that. So I'm trying to think where I could get. I knew I couldn't get scissors because they would know that scissors were missing and I'd get in trouble for it. So I realized that like blades that you shave your face with, they have blades in them. So I went into the bathroom and I tried to take one of those apart to get a blade out, and I couldn't get it out. So I just put it back how it was. So my stepdad still to this day thinks that I purposely bent his razor blade so that when he would shave, he would cut his throat and die. That's the story that he says. And up until whenever the last time was that he said that, that's really what he believes. Like, you're so stupid to think that that's what would happen, but whatever. So, I think I've established that I had a pretty shitty childhood, but the feeling is the important part here. The feeling of never being good enough, not feeling loved, like just feeling like nobody wants you around. So, my mom ended up kicking me out, just because of a whole bunch of things. A whole bunch of things that I was doing because I'm such a bad kid. They kicked me out, sent me to live with my dad, and things went really good for a long time, up until we moved to Canandaigua. And when I moved to Canandaigua, I met up with a couple kids that I went to school with and started hanging out in the street, and we just started doing a bunch of random stupid crap, mostly just BMXing. I was really big into BMX then. But, we'd go into a store to buy a drink or something, and we'd walk out of the store. I'd have my drink, and they would have their pockets lined with whatever they just stole. And so I was like, you know what? That sounds like a really good idea. So, basically, every single time I went into any store, I would just start stealing stuff. And I actually got really good at it and, really bad with it. I'd started breaking into cars, stealing stuff out of cars, and just a couple of years of doing bad criminal stuff, but I was a kid. I think at this point I was 14 or 15, and eventually I got caught on camera, and the cop told me to, when I got caught, I was going back and forth to court, and the cop told me write down everything that I stole on a piece of paper And if I help him figure out which crimes that were me, so he could cross them off of his list of crimes he had to solve, like he just basically he bullshitted me. I was a 14-year-old kid. I'd never been in trouble before, not legally anyway. I didn't know what I was doing. So I wrote down every single thing that I stole that I could remember, and it was a very long list. And because of me admitting to all these crimes, basically they sent me to, juvie. But it was juvenile prison. It was prison for kids. The only reason we weren't in maximum secure adult prison was because of my age. But the stuff I saw there and heard was just absolutely horrible. You should not, any kid should not have to deal with stuff like that. Just nonstop fighting and stabbings, and I personally never saw anybody be raped, but I heard about it. Just bad stuff. A lot of gang activity, a lot of, just real horrible stuff. And not even that, but it was also the staff there. The staff were beating the shit out of kids. I watched somebody be paralyzed by a staff. I watched arms broken, teeth punched out of faces by staff. Basically these people got jobs there just to go there and just beat the shit out of kids. I don't know what happened in their life to make it so they felt that they had to do that, but they did. And it was almost every single one of the staff. There was like two or one that I could think of that pops into my head. Mr. Livingston at Industry. He was awesome. He was a Christian. He was a really cool dude. He was always trying to look out for you. But pretty much other than that, it was just a long list of staff that came in there and punched the clock and got paid pretty much to beat the piss out of kids. And I had to deal with that. I got sentenced to 1 year. I ended up doing almost 3. Every time I went back to court, they would just extend me. And they finally let me out because it was the summer before I turned 18. And basically they just said, you're a lost cause. You can go home. So I came home, and now it's right back to being me and all my brothers. Just looking out for each other. I got a job, and now my brothers were real big into stealing. And my brother Nick actually told me one time that the only reason, because he did stop stealing, they all stopped stealing at one point. And he told me that the reason why they stopped stealing was because they knew that if I had money, I was going to buy them whatever they were going to be stealing anyway, because it was, one for all and all for one, because that's the way we always were. We were always very, very close. We were always... back at that time, when I got out of juvie, they were real big into skateboarding and guitar, and I just remember being unbelievably proud at how good they were at guitar and skateboarding. They were all very good. It blows your mind if you hear them now. No lessons, no music lessons, just all self-taught. And it all started from when I was going into juvie. My buddy gave me a BC Rich Warlock, and I gave it to my brother Tony so he could practice, because I wasn't going to need it in juvie. So I wanted somebody to get some use out of it. And he did, apparently, because they were great when I got out. I was always so proud of them with it. So some time goes by. Me and my stepdad still aren't getting along. I end up getting kicked out again. And this time I go and I move in with my grandfather on Child Street. 17 years old on Child Street, and they still live there. And I've pretty much lived there or around the west side ever since. And I'm 32 now. So, minus the couple years where I was in Farmington or Canandaigua or Victor or, a couple months here and there of living in Phelps and stuff like that. It's always been the city. It's always been the west side. And when I was real little, we grew up on McCardle off of Mount Reed. So I've always been a west side kid. It was just a couple years where I was in juvie or in Chile or Canandaigua that I wasn't in the city. So I don't remember when it happened, but eventually, we always did smoke weed. I don't really classify weed as a drug. I personally don't smoke weed anymore, but I'm very pro marijuana. So we smoke weed just like normal teenagers do. But eventually, we progressed and we started doing coke, and then started doing acid and mushrooms and Molly, and at one point I sold bath salts and Molly and coke for I actually made a real good amount of money off of it. Never got caught, thank God. But eventually the drugs, they always progressed. And the one thing in drugs that I always loved was how it made you forget. It numbed you to everything. Like I'm a 32-year-old man now, so now I've pretty much, and today I've dealt with, all the shit from my past, and I've learned how to deal with it. But it was still nice being numb, not having to think of everything. So a couple years go by. Now my little brothers live with my father in Farmington. And I quit my job in the city because I was supposed to be getting a better job in Farmington. So this was an opportunity for me to move back in with my brothers, which I missed. Whenever I'm not around them, I miss them. So I did. I moved out to Farmington. I met this girl the first day I was out there, actually. I met her that night, like a couple hours after I met her. I banged her in my dad's hot tub. It was like a jacuzzi tub, not like an actual hot tub, like a bathtub with jacuzzi jets in it. I screwed her in that. And then, long story short, about, I forget how many years later, but we ended up having 3 kids together. And that was it. I found my purpose in life. My purpose in life was to be a father. And I remember when every single one of them was born. I remember what their voices sounded like when they cried, when I hear them crying for the first time. I remember that feeling of, that thought in my head is like, you know what? I will die before I allow those feelings that I had when I was a kid of not being loved and not feeling wanted and, feeling like nobody wants you around. I will die before I let you kids feel that. And I meant it, and I still do mean it. If I had the option to die right now to make sure that they would never feel any type of that pain again or ever, I would in a heartbeat, without question. So that was my purpose in life, and I was there since day one. I was there for all the pregnancies. Me and my baby mom lived together. I was there when they were born. I was there for everything. Up until my oldest son was, I think, like 3 or 4. My middle son was 2 or 3. And my youngest son he was a baby. He was a couple months. I actually skipped the big part. So when I was living on Child Street, first, like when I got out of juvie, like a year or 2 went by, and I met this one chick, and we ended up moving in together. We had an apartment that I paid for. She didn't pay a dime towards any bill, even though I wanted her to. She didn't, because she's just that type of person that never paid for anything. Everything to her is just whatever I can get for free. She ended up getting pregnant, and I had my first son on 7/19/06. 2006, I had my first son, Josh Jr., and that was great. But when I moved to Farmington, she was still pregnant. When I moved to Farmington for that job and met that other chick, she was still pregnant, but I knew it, by then I knew what type of person she was, and I couldn't be with her. Like, she was always argumentative, always fighting, always shady, always talking to other dudes. Like, so you know how, you know what I'm talking about. Just some women are just not loyal women. Some men too. And that, it's not just a woman thing. Some people are just not at all loyal people. They would rather cheat just because they'd rather have that temporary, immediate feel good than the long-term benefits of being faithful to a good man or woman. So she called me when she had the baby. She didn't call me to say she was going into labor. She called me when she was having the baby. So she was also dating this other kid. And when the baby was born, I went to the hospital. I seen him. And I saw him that whole first year. And I threw a birthday party for him on his first birthday. And that was the last time I saw him. Her new boyfriend that she was with, he also knew what type of person she was. And he didn't trust her at all, which he had every right in the world to. She's not a trustworthy person. So he told her he's not allowed to see his son because I know that you two are going to be screwing. Making sure it's still recording. Wow, it's been 40 minutes. Nobody's going to watch this whole video. I'll try to get to the juicy parts pretty quick. 3 o'clock in the morning. So he told her he's not allowed to see his son because I know you two are going to be screwing if he does. So there was nothing I could do legally. Like, I could have, broke into her house and killed everybody and taken my son, but that's obviously out of the question. So when I say that there was nothing I could do, I mean legally. There was legally nothing I could do to see my son, and I did not see him again until his 8th birthday, around his 8th birthday, when he was 8 years old. So 7 years I did not see him. So that, along with my childhood and along with everything else, now I have my oldest son that every single day eats at me that I can't see him. So now I'm with this other girl. We ended up having 3 kids. I have a family, and I'm like, okay, all right, now you're caught up. Now I know what it's like to be a father. And that was my purpose on earth. I loved being a father. Like, people always talk about, I hear them talking about how their kids are irritating them, or, they're doing this or they're doing that, or they can't handle it, or they're stressed out, or, this and that, and blah, 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 all this negative crap. Like, it was never like that for me. I absolutely loved being a father. I loved every single minute of it. And I went to jail for buying some kid a bottle of liquor. I worked with him. Like, we had a full-time job together. I assumed the kid was 21. He called me one day. He was like, yo, can you buy me a bottle? I lost my ID. I'm like, yeah, sure. So I met him at the liquor store, bought him a bottle. Come to find out, the kid was only like 17 or something like that. I got arrested for it. And I went to jail for it. I did like 60 days. While I'm in jail, baby mama number 2 decides to fuck the same dude that baby mama number 1 was fucking. The dude that told her he's not allowed to see his son. Like, that is the ultimate betrayal. It does not get any more betrayed than that. That is the ultimate piece of shit move that you could do to somebody. So I got out of jail. It was a while later that I found out about it, but I did find out about it. And what I did was I packed some of my shit, like my laptop and some clothes, and I moved out. When I moved out, she took that as an invitation to get drunk every day and do drugs every day, with the kids in the house. So CPS ended up getting called. Long story short, CPS ends up taking the kids away from her. They tell me, go get an apartment and do this and do that and do that and do this, and you can get your kids and they can live with you. I said, okay, cool. That's exactly what I want to happen. So I did every single thing that they told me to do. I did the anger management classes. I did the drug and alcohol evaluations, the anger management or anger evaluation, whatever you want to call it. Everything was no treatment recommended. I was completely honest. I didn't lie in the interviews or whatever. I just didn't need any treatment. I was not an angry guy, and I was not a drug addict. So, long story short, it was I think it was like 2 years of court, going back and forth to court, and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and do this and do this and do this, and I did every single thing that they asked me to do. And in the end, I found out that the plan was to never give me my kids back to begin with. They didn't want me to have my kids back. The CPS worker, her name was Catherine Boquetto. She was an absolute lying, conniving, sneaky piece of garbage. And she actually, my case was her last case. She lost her job after my case for being a shady, sneaky, manipulative piece of garbage who bent the law to work around what she wanted to happen. And basically, I lost parental rights to my children. And still to this day, I haven't seen them since then. And now it's been probably 7, 8 years, I'm guessing, that I have not seen my younger 3 children in. So that, again, was another devastating blow to who I am, my heart, my soul. So, needless to say, once I started doing drugs and, that escape was exactly what I needed to happen. I did sniffed a couple Percocet or something like that, and all that anger and hurt and pain and agony and all these negative feelings that I had in my soul from an entire life of bullshit, it all disappeared for those couple hours that I was high. So one day a buddy of mine was over and he had some heroin, and I was like, you know what? I want to try that. I want to see what heroin's like. So I sniffed it, and the feeling, like the physical sensation of it, it felt like pills. So I was like, okay, this isn't bad. This isn't some, demonic drug that's going to steal my heart and soul and turn me into some animal. Vape break. So eventually I started sniffing heroin a good amount, and it almost got to the point where I was a full-blown addict. The only thing that saved me was that around this time, now mind you, with me losing my kids and with everything else, my attitude towards life was just fuck it. Like, I didn't care about anything. I had, nothing was holding me back as far as doing stupid shit. So one of the stupid things I did was sell drugs. And when you sell drugs in the city, there's always somebody that offers you guns or, trades or stolen shit and blah, 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 this and that. Well, one of the trades that I took for drugs was an AK-47. And I was in the woods of Macedon shooting this AK-47 with my brother Tony and my other brother Nick's then girlfriend, his girl Jamie. And we get done shooting and we leave, and I'm driving my truck with an AK-47 in it with no license, with 2 ounces of Molly in the glove compartment. And as soon as I pull onto the road, there are 3 cops that pass me, and I'm like, oh, you gotta be fucking kidding me. Please don't turn around. Please don't turn around. So I'm looking in my rear view. Sure enough, they turn around. So obviously, I got arrested for that. They ended up asking me, because this was in Wayne County, and I guess around that time there was a lot of burglaries happening, and they asked me, they said that they won't put me in jail if I will snitch on whoever is doing these burglaries. And I explained to them, I'm not from Macedon. I don't know that many people in Macedon. But if you give me an appearance ticket, I will find out who has been doing these burglaries, and I will snitch on them. So they gave me an appearance ticket. And about 2 days later, I was on a train to Montana, because there was no way in fuck that I was actually going to snitch on anybody. And they were the dumbasses that were stupid enough to give me an appearance ticket for a couple felonies, when I already have a felony in the past. So I went on the run. I went to Montana. So long story short, Montana didn't work out. I come back to New York. I do heroin a couple more times. Did it pretty hard. I definitely would have turned into an addict then, but I got caught. I got caught at work, actually. I was doing insulation at Churchville Chili High School, and I got caught and at school. Lost that job, obviously, making $47 an hour, and I went to jail. Long story short, with that, they ended up dropping the felony, and they gave me the same charge, but like one tier lower. So instead of like second or third degree, it was fourth degree, which made it a Class A misdemeanor, something like that. Oh, they charged me with the wrong gun. That's what it was. My actual gun was an AKS-74U. It was like a short version of an AK-47. On the paperwork, they charged me with an SKS. So I don't know if that was the actual reason or what was going on, but that's the only thing I could think of why they would just all of a sudden drop the felony. Because my first offer was 3.5 to 7 years. Or no, or was it 7.5 to 15? I don't know, I forget. It was a long time. So I go to court, and I'm supposed to be telling the judge either I'll take this plea and do these 7 years, or I'm taking it to trial, in which case I'll probably be fucked and I'll probably end up doing 15 years. So I show up and they're like, okay, well, if you plead to this lesser charge, you'll get a year in county jail. I was like, okay, I'll definitely take that. And that time I already been in jail for like 4 months, so I had like another 4 months to do. I was like, yeah, I'll definitely do that. So I did my time in jail. That's what stopped me from being a heroin addict then. I get out of jail. Now I have nowhere to live. I have no money. My truck, the girl that I was dating decided that she was going to trade it in for a car. Basically, she stole my vehicle. I had a probably $30,000, $40,000 stereo system in that truck that went with the vehicle. The stereo was worth more than the vehicle. And she gave that also to the dealership for her trade. So now I'm staying with my dad in his tattoo shop. I'm staying in the basement of a tattoo shop. And my little brother Tony is living there. Well, Tony has for several years now been a full-blown active heroin addict, an intravenous heroin addict. So, mind you, in my head, I'm still thinking, I still have the fuck it mentality. More so now, because I just got out of jail and I'm just saying fuck everything. So, I sniffed heroin with him for, a couple weeks. And then eventually, with his nagging and him telling me, like, bro, let me bring you into my world. Let me show you what this is all about. Which was a pretty scumbaggy thing to do. And I remember thinking in my head, I want to see what is so good about this drug that makes everybody just say, fuck everything. I'm going to throw everything down the drain and just do this drug. That's the thought that went through my head. So I told myself I would let him shoot me up one time just to see what it felt like, and then that would be it. Well, he did. He mixed up 2 and 2, 2 cocaine, 2 heroin, shot me up in my hand, and he missed. So now I'm like, okay, well, I have to let him shoot me up again so I can actually, I can just do that for no reason. So he shot me up again, and I felt it. And the feeling I felt was indescribable. That first time doing intravenous drugs and intravenous speedball it's undescribable. It is ecstasy to a level you would not even comprehend. On top of that, it was just a complete numbness of all the bullshit. So now, since I already shot up twice, I might as well shoot up a couple more times. I'll just stop before I get addicted to it. So I shot up a couple more times. That couple more times turned into about 2 or 3 months of shooting heroin and cocaine almost every single day. Well, now I get my own apartment, and I'm all happy about my apartment. I just don't feel like doing drugs one day. So I'm cleaning up my apartment, I'm doing this, I'm wiping down walls and mopping floors and moving in furniture and stuff like that, and I was in a good mood. There was no reason for me to do heroin. So that night I lay down to go to sleep, and that was my first experience of being dope sick. I didn't even know what was going on at first. I thought I just felt like shit. I was, like shaky in my back, and like my back was all squirmy, and I had to keep moving in order to get the sensation to stop. Tony ended up moving in with me, which was good and bad. He needed somewhere to stay, and he was my connection into heroin. So I started shooting heroin every single day, and that's when my addiction really took off bad, was in that apartment. My rent was only $250 a month for a 1-bedroom apartment, a very nice 1-bedroom apartment. It was in the house of the boyfriend of my buddy's sister. So like that's how I got the place. I ended up not paying rent for like a year straight. And eventually it got to the point where he didn't want me to live there anymore. Obviously, I'm not paying the guy. They ended up kicking me out. Then I go stay with my brother Joe, who was also a heroin addict at this time. And now Tony is also staying with him. So now all four of us brothers are back together again. And we're all doing heroin together. Well, eventually it got to the point where I ran out of money. I had no tattoos coming up. And so I went with my brother Tony to go do what he did almost every single day to get money for heroin, which was go steal shit. Just go into stores and steal shit and pawn it and then go get high. And that became my process for probably the next 2 or 3 or 4 years straight of just stealing stuff. Like my addiction just kept getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse and worse, and I just kept getting further and further and further down. Pawned everything that I ever owned. Pawned all my stereos, my computers, my laptops, my tablets, my Chromebooks, my netbooks, my this, my that. Pawned everything. Pawned my PS4. I pawned my PS3. I pawned my Xbox 360. Literally everything that was of any value was gone. So, now mind you, this is a couple of years later. Now I'm just so fucking miserable in life. Because now, eventually I get to the point where doing heroin is not about feeling good anymore. And it's not about feeling numb anymore. Like now it's about I need to do it, because if I don't, I'm going to be rolling around on the floor, throwing up, damn near shitting my pants in a puddle of sweat and absolute agony, and physical and mental agony. Ugh. Yeah, it's so bad. So I stayed with my dad again for a while, and me and him would get into fights all the time because I'd borrow money off of him all the time and then never pay it back. And one of our fights, he kicked me out and I couldn't stay with him anymore. So I stayed under a bridge in the winter, and it was freezing, and I did that for a week or two straight. And hopefully nobody watching this has ever experienced this, but if you ever get to the point where you've not felt warmth in months, that is a horrible feeling. Sleeping under bridges and then waking up freezing, walking around, hopefully trying to warm up, hopefully it's not a blizzard or a freezing day out, and trying to figure out ways to get high, trying to figure out a car so you can go boosting, so you go stealing shit and go to the pawn shop. Eventually it got to the point where I couldn't do it anymore. I already tried to get clean. I already tried figuring out how to do rehab. I already checked myself into hospitals, and nobody would help me out. No hospital I called would help me out. No hospital I went to, no emergency room would help me out. They all just let me sit in the hospital room, dope sick, some overnight, and then they'd kick me out in the morning. So one of these days, I bought 10 bags of dope and 10 bags of cocaine. And I told myself I was going to kill myself. I loaded it all up into the syringe. I put the needle in my body, and I was about to push the plunger. And I remember telling myself, like, fuck, do you really want to do this, Josh? Like, once you push that plunger, it's over. You're absolutely guaranteed going to be overdosed. You're going to be dead. That's going to be the end of it. And then as I was thinking that, I thought, you need to hurry up and do it because you're going to talk yourself out of it. So before I even got done with that sentence, I pushed the plunger in, and just an insane wave came over me of the drugs. And then, obviously, I blacked out. And that is where I'm going to stop this video for now. It is already a 55-minute video. Wow, I've been talking for an hour. I'm going to stop that there for now. I'm going to upload this. I'm going to see how the reactions are of it. And I will make a part 2, hopefully tomorrow. Starting from when I tried to kill myself. Obviously, it didn't work because I'm here making this video now. But that is part 1 of this video. If you guys want to hear more, comment. If you guys would subscribe, it would help me out. It would let me know that the people actually care about what I have to say. And if you watch the intro to this video, it's going to tell you what this channel is about. This channel is not about the depression and all the negative stuff of being an addict. This channel is about how I got out of being an addict. That's the important part. So stick around for part 2. If you guys want to join the Facebook group, it's 585 Recovery. I'm going to have a blog channel opening up soon. And that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Hope it opened up some eyes and let you guys know that it's a very, very shitty world being an addict. But you'll hear more about it in part 2. So you guys stay strong, stay safe. Peace.